a terrific chocolate Grand Marnier cake in this oven. It's the most often requested of all my baking recipes. It's okay to open the oven door even though it's not quite done because it's more than halfway through the baking, and I'm just going to touch it lightly to see if it bounces back. If it feels the slightest bit soft, I return it to the oven to bake for a few more minutes. Meantime, I'm going to show you how to make the rest of the cake. One of the secret ingredients for this Grand Marnier chocolate cake are mini chocolate chip morsels. They're really little ones, suspend beautifully in the cake batter. And here's the trick to making them suspend. I add a little bit of liquid just to moisten them. 1/4 teaspoon is all that it takes. And then the flour. And if you can't find many chips, although they're really easy to find these days, chop up some regular bittersweet, your favorite bittersweet eating chocolate, and dust out with a, if you put it in a coarse strainer, you can dust out any of the powder because you don't want to have the fine bits of chocolate. You want to see the distinct little morsels throughout the golden batter. It's a little warm in the kitchen today, so as you can see that they're clumping up. So what I'm going to do is to add just a little bit of extra flour to help them separate. This won't make any difference to the recipe. In fact, if I find any flour at the bottom, I'll just leave it behind. Now the next step is to weigh the flour. And the important thing here is to use cake flour that is not bleached. And of course, cake flour is never bleached, but some of it is self-rising. Use the type that is just plain cake flour because we're adding our own leavening. We're adding baking soda and baking powder. And now when I add the flour, I'll see if I have the 8 3/4 ounces. This is a lot faster and a lot more accurate than measuring it. It's 8.65, so I need a tiny bit more flour. There we are. And now this is ready to add to the mixer. And you can see I'm using the paddle beater because this is a butter cake. It's not a sponge cake. I'm not trying to beat a lot of air into it. All the dry ingredients are going to be combined together. This is the sugar, but it's not that much sugar. It's only a cup of sugar for all that flour, for 2½ cups of flour. And the reason is that some of the sugar is going to go into a syrup afterwards. Baking powder, baking soda because of the sour cream. That's going to also help suspend the chocolate chips, and the salt. And the other dry ingredient is sliced almonds. And that I'm going to chop up fine in a food processor. And the reason I can do it without turning it into a paste is because it's already been sliced. They've been sliced. If you use little chunks, it's very hard to process them fine. In that case, I would process them together with a little bit of the flour to help absorb the oil from the nuts. And you can see that these nuts have a skin around them. That means that they're not blanched. And if you can only find blanched, it will be fine. But the skin in an almond is not like the skin in a walnut that's bitter. It's actually a good flavor. So I like to add as much as I can. Now I'm going to process this until I get a fine powder. And if it's warm in the kitchen and I see that it's beginning to clump, I'll just take some of the flour right back out of the bowl. I don't want it to be too powder fine because I like a little texture in the cake. This adds both flavor and texture. Sort of coarse meal stage. And now this, oh, it smells heavenly because they've been toasted, and that brings out the flavor too. All these little things are what add. And the other semi-dry ingredient that gets added is 2 tablespoons of orange zest. And it's the orange portion, not the white pith that's bitter. And now these ingredients get beaten together, and that mixes them thoroughly before I start adding the liquid ingredients. It just takes about a minute. After it's mixed together, I'm going to mix together the liquid ingredients. I take about 1/4 of the sour cream in the recipe and I add it to the eggs and also the vanilla. And just whisk together to make it easier to beat into the batter. Just to break up the eggs. You can use a fork too, but a whisk works a lot faster. Now this is ready to add, but first I'm going to add the rest of the sour cream, the 3/4 of the remaining sour cream, and the butter, which is softened to cool room temperature. Cool but squishable, the magic words. This is a very buttery, mellow cake because of the sour cream. But it's the Grand Marnier that really gives it the lift. Now I'm going to mix the batter on medium speed, but I start always on slow speed to keep the flour from jumping out. And work it up to medium and beat for 1.5 minutes until it's evenly mixed. If you see the flour coming out, don't bring it up until you stop seeing the dust. Before I add the rest of the batter, I like to scrape the sides, which never get totally mixed in. Now I'm going to add the rest of the ingredients in 3 parts, and then bring it up to medium speed for about 20 seconds, and then back down again on low. Up again, 20 seconds. Then down on low and add the remaining ingredients. And finish beating until it's smooth, another 20 seconds. And if you're using a handheld mixer, do it on high speed. It goes about equivalent to a stand mixer on medium speed. And now I'm going to scrape the sides of the bowl while I add the mini morsels. Now I'm just folding them into the batter, and that helps to mix the rest of the batter, the part that stuck on the sides. Always scrape down to the bottom because sometimes the beater doesn't reach the bottom of the bowl. And now it's ready to fill the pan. I love using tube pans, especially for this cake, because the tube conducts the heat from the center to the side, so there's only this much distance between the side of the pan and the center, and it bakes very evenly. The best way to make sure that this is going to come out of the pan and have a beautiful crust is by greasing and flouring, but I like to use a spray that has the grease and the flour in it, because to get into all these little convolutions, it's hard to do it. You can see it would be practically impossible to do a good job of it if you're greasing and flouring with a traditional way. And I just brush around with a brush because I don't want the spray to clump up in any spot and cause an air bubble. And now the batter goes into the pan.